1991, specializing in mega projects using PowerBuilder and PowerServer in the latter years. When we're talking mega projects, we're talking about users 10,000 plus, and we're talking about databases in the petabytes. In 2016, I joined Appeon as the director, and I'm responsible today for developer liaison, PowerBuilder fundamentals courses, other technical presentations, and support. As you can see here, my skills, lots of PowerBuilder experience in PowerServer. Originally, before doing that, I was working as a database administrator, IRM, and data management. I've got lots of experience with Windows internals, almost every database management system out there, and lots of programming experience, of course. My current forte is in systems, technical, and application architecture. So let's have a look at what we're going to discuss in this session. Before starting, notice that we're going to be talking, of course, PowerServer 2021, but remember mentally, you have to remember that it has two sides. It has an application side, which is the PowerBuilder application, and then it has the PowerServer server side. These are two separate entities, but they are basically joined and work in unison. It's basically a symbiotic relationship. So let's have a look. First of all, we're going to discuss the requirements, the prerequisites for the installation, which is going to cover the web server, especially on the fact that in PowerServer, the application itself is actually packaged and deployed to the web server. And from the client's point of view, it's pulled down from the web server. Well, of course, that's why we call it a cloud native architecture. And we also have to consider the database management system that you're using and what other pre-installation requirements you may have for PowerServer itself. I recommend wholeheartedly that you download and install the sales order demo application. You'll see it there in the PowerBuilder Installer when you bring down PowerBuilder and PowerServer 2021. It comes with a demo database, which can be installed in various database management systems. But this is a great way to verify your installation after you've actually configured your development environment. And we also have to verify the .NET frameworks as well, because PowerBuilder and PowerServer rely on a combination of those. And we're going to have to verify the web server installation as well, that you have the minimum HTTP, HTTPS requirements. And we're also have to look at the Appeon Installer because there's a couple of different options that you can use for installing not only PowerBuilder but PowerServer. And there's a decision that you may want to make. Do I want to do an online install or an offline install? So let's have a look at the PowerServer 2021 deploying installable cloud apps. First of all, before you get started, note the please read in the top left. I would suggest that you read the release bulletin and the installation guide before you even start. Another good thing to do is to read the product manuals on the Quick Start and License Guide. And note that you can actually find those online. So you don't have to download and install PowerBuilder and PowerServer to get those manuals, which also come with the installation. You can read it online at docs.appeon.com. Let's have a look at that now. So you can see here in the web browser, I actually went to docs.appeon.com. You'll notice here that you have the different products: PowerBuilder, PowerServer, Snap, PowerServer Migrator, PowerScript Migrator, InfoMaker, etc. Of course, what we're interested in is PowerServer. So if we go down here to PowerServer, you'll notice here that we can actually read the release bulletin and the installation guide. So I recommend you read those two for sure, just before you actually start the installation process after watching this video. So let's have a look at the requirements for PowerBuilder 2021 Cloud Pro. So the requirements are that when you install that, of course, you're going to get PowerBuilder. That's why you need the Cloud Pro edition. So from here, we're actually going to start the installer. And the installer is going to ask us, for example, to install one of the test databases, or what PowerBuilder and PowerServer are going to connect to. So typically, the demo database that comes along with the install can be either installed under SQL Anywhere or Postgres. So I'd recommend that you pick up the demo database, which is optional, but I recommend that you install it for sure in the development environment for verification purposes for sure. Also, in the support side, which I am, it's nice if you can open a support ticket for something, and then create a simple test case application that uses one of those demo databases, because the engineering team has it at their disposal as well. We don't have to go and spend a lot of time recreating your particular database flavor, although sometimes we need to do that. But it's nice if your test case actually runs from one of those demo databases. It makes us a lot faster to get to that particular problem and analyze it. So the next thing we're going to have to do is install the web server. Notice that you can basically use almost any web server. Some examples, IIS, Apache, NGIX, for example. In this particular demos that I've been doing in the different sessions that I'll be having here at Elevate 2021, I'll be using IIS, which I have running here on this machine. The next thing is to install the PowerBuilder IDE itself. Well, that's pretty straightforward. Most people have done that for quite a few releases now and are quite familiar with that. However, during the install process, because you're using the Cloud Pro Edition, it's also going to ask you to install a PowerServer 2021 Toolkit. So as you use the older versions of PowerServer, you basically understand that there's a secondary toolbar that appears in the IDE. This is the same for the 2021 version, except it looks a little bit different and functions a little bit different than the older PowerServer. But it still was called the PowerServer Toolkit to get that extra toolbar, so you definitely don't want to skip that one. The next thing is the PowerServer prerequisites. So the installer is going to ask for that. For example, it's going to ask you for bringing in the .NET framework, or bringing down the NuGet packages for Snap Development, which is another IDE that comes along with the Cloud Pro Edition of PowerBuilder. Notice that an internet connection will be required. PowerServer requires it for its licensing model. And then, of course, if you're using Snap Development, which can actually look at the source code that's being generated in PowerServer, it may want to download some updated NuGet packages. So you're going to have an internet connection. So just keep that in mind, not only in development, but also for production, because the production PowerServer also needs to check the online licensing servers, the Appeon servers. So they will need an internet connection as well in production. The next thing, of course, is optionally you can install Snap Development. I'd highly recommend that because, again, you can review the actual C# source code. And the other important thing is you can actually modify the code. Sometimes you can tweak some of the code, or you can tweak some of the control files, which are basically JSON oriented. You can do that very easily through the IDE. And that's the end. So PowerServer 2021, it'll convert any existing PowerBuilder client-server app to an end-tier app. Of course, it's going to convert it to support a cloud-native architecture, which we'll talk about. It's an automatic conversion, almost no reprogramming. If you actually attend my session on the actual PowerServer project, we'll talk about the fact that why you would encounter some things that you need to reprogram. But I'm not covering it in this particular presentation. It's going to allow secured access, especially for the fact that you can actually not only have like HTTPS connectivity security, but you can also go from certificates to JWT or O authorization, for example. So there's different kind of templates that you can basically activate to get even further secured access. Flexible deployment, and the fact that I've already mentioned that you don't have to use IIS. You can use almost any web server that you want. In the actual PowerBuilder and PowerServer documentation, it talks about how to set up Apache and NGIX, for example. I'm going to be showing you here today exactly what I've been doing on IIS. And notice that the PowerServer application server itself can be deployed to other operating systems, not just Windows. So there's some flexibility there as well, because of course the PowerServer is being compiled into the .NET Core framework, which runs on various platforms. And in the future, of course, as .NET Core goes to other platforms, so will PowerServer availability to run in that production environment as well. It supports most of the leading DBMS today. You can see the list there. You may notice other ones, like, for example, HANA is not on the list, but all the other major ones are. The only reason for that is the HANA database management system at this point in time does not have a .NET Core database client. As soon as it does, then PowerServer can support it. That's why it's not on the list today. And very easy to maintain, because everything you do is going to be focused around the PowerBuilder IDE. So interacting from there, the IDE to the PowerServer Toolkit to PowerServer itself, is all done through that standard PowerBuilder IDE, which you already know and love. So first of all, verifying the SQL Anywhere installation. Go to your Windows Start, and then if you actually click on that on Windows 10, you'll get the settings, which is that little gear icon. In Windows 11, you can just right-hand mouse the Windows Start button, and the settings option will come up on the pop-up right-hand mouse button. Note that even though PowerBuilder 2021 and PowerServer 2021 have not been officially tested on Windows 11, I've been running Windows 11 with that combination for about a month, and everything works perfectly. I have not had one hiccup. So just in case you want to try it with Windows 11, I would say there's an excellent chance that everything's going to work okay if you're actually in that leading OS environment. The next thing, of course, is you're going to go to Settings in Windows 10, for example, Applications and Features, and in the shortcut, you can type in SQL Anywhere. And then you'll see a list of those particular database entities installed. If you don't have it, notice you can go to the URL listed below, sap.com products SQL Anywhere trial, and make sure you choose either version 16 or 17 of that database engine, which is the most current ones. You can ignore the word trial. If you don't actually activate the product, it stays in developer mode. The next thing you also have to do is make sure that the database clients are installed. Notice the note at the bottom. The 32-bit driver is used for the PowerBuilder runtime and the IDE, and the 64-bit client is used for PowerServer because PowerServer is running in 64-bit mode. This would also be true, for example, if you wanted to build 64-bit executables in the PowerBuilder IDE and run your native client server in 64-bit as well. You'll need that 64-bit driver for PowerBuilder runtime as well. So you might as well bring down both. If you hit the Modify in Windows 10, well, you'll see here, for example, if you go to Programs and Features, which is from the Control Panel, you can also use the right-hand mouse button and select Change. So either the Modify or the Change from either two dialogues will bring you to a next dialog, which is, these are the drivers that are installed. So you notice here on my machine that I've got SQL Anywhere 64-bit, the actual DBMS is installed, but the clients, I've got both 64 and 32-bit installed. So just make sure that you have both of them installed, and you're ready to go for not only PowerBuilder variations for the PowerBuilder IDE and executable, but also for PowerServer as well. So for PostgreSQL installation, again, you can go to the Start button on Windows 10 and then select the gear for settings, or in Windows 11, right-hand mouse button, the Start button, and select from the pop-up settings. And then you get something that looks like this. And again, we can type in to search for an application called Postgres. You notice on my machine, I have version 12 installed. Notice the tip at the bottom. PowerServer 2021 supports Postgres versions only 11.3, 12, or 13. If you go and download it from the URL that I've given you here, postgres.org/download, you'll notice higher versions like 14. But don't install that because PowerServer 2021 only supports up to version 13. In PowerServer 2022, it'll support the new Postgres version 14. So checking the Postgres ODBC driver to make sure that everything's there for both the PowerBuilder IDE and runtime executables, as well as PowerServer. Again, if you're missing any of these, that you can go to postgres.com/ODBC PostgreSQL and download the appropriate driver. An easy way to check, because it's not listed in the control panel like we did for SQL Anywhere, is to go to the ODBC administrator and try and create a data source. As soon as you do that, it pops up with the actual drivers that are installed. So after the PostgreSQL installation, depending on the flavor of the install, you may have both the 32 and the 64-bit. You may also have the Unicode 32 and the Unicode 64-bit installed. It's pretty easy to see it from the ODBC administrator. If you don't have these installed and you think you're going to need them, then you can go back again to that URL that you see here at the top. Notice, however, that for PowerServer itself, the note at the bottom, it says PowerServer has its own native 64-bit database driver for Postgres. So you really don't need the 64-bit unless, for example, again, you're going to create a native 64-bit application, client-server application, and you want to use a 64-bit driver. If you're not going to do that, then you don't have to worry about it. PowerServer comes with its own. But you will need the 32-bit driver, because one of the things that happens when you actually process, build, and deploy a PowerServer project actually has to have a database connection, because it verifies the SQL in your client application and verifies that against the SQL tables. So it needs the 32-bit access from the IDE to do that verification process. We'll talk about more of that in the actual PowerServer project session. For SQL Anywhere or Postgres, select Additional Options, select your DBMS, and then select your business. This is done in Installer. So when you actually run the installer, you'll see, for example, that there's an extra tab page on the far right-hand side. This is where you can say, yes, I want to have that demo database installed. And if so, it's going to ask you, for example, which SQL Anywhere or Postgres version do you want? And then you actually have to choose whether you're actually running a 32-bit environment or a 64-bit environment. On my machine, I'm running both of these DBMS, and of course the server itself is 64-bit, but I choose that the PowerBuilder IDE is connecting via the 32-bit only ODBC driver. So web server installation. So open the Windows control panel. I'm going to be using IIS, so this is just one example. But note at the bottom that if you go into the PowerServer documentation or the help file that comes with PowerBuilder 2021 Cloud Pro, you can go into the documentation and it'll tell you some of the tips in order to make ready Apache or NGIX that to also support the PowerServer application side. So let's have a look. First of all, going to the Programs and Features. Then going into the actual top left-hand side, turn Windows features on or off. And then you'll see, for example, one of the things you can do is to actually turn Internet Information Services on, and then underneath Worldwide Web Services. And then what you need is a minimum common HTTP features. So let's have a look at that on my machine. So bringing up the Windows control panel, you can see here we can go to Programs and Features. We can have a look in the top left-hand corner. There's the Windows features on or off. And then you can see here, for example, Internet Information Services has been actually checked. And we have a look here at Worldwide Web Services and then common HTTP features. So that's the minimum that you need to have on. All the other checkboxes are optional. However, what I'd like to do here, for example, is I like to use ASP.NET. So if you use ASP.NET, the PowerServer web services, the RESTful web services that are being exposed, can be called from an ASP.NET application. So in my case, I like to have ASP.NET installed as well, just to test that aspect as well. The other thing that I would suggest is if you're going to install the IIS web server on a different machine than the developer's machine, then also install it with FTP services as well. That's because from the PowerBuilder IDE to that remote IIS for deployment of the PowerServer application side, the IDE is going to require the FTP server services. And then everything else, web management tools, internet services, hostable core, that kind of stuff would be optional. So now that you've installed the Worldwide Web Services and you've got the HTTP features, the other thing you can actually do then is, again, like I said, make sure that if you're going to do a remote, do the FTP server. The next thing here for IIS is make sure that you assign IIS users with full permissions. And that would be done on the www root folder if you're running IIS locally. So you'll see it looks like that. So going here to my file manager, if I go here to inetpub, www root, use the right-hand mouse button, select Properties, you can actually see the properties and the security. And then you can see here under the security, IIS users is already there. Notice, however, that there's no ability here to read or write or list folder contents. You probably want to do that. And you would go here by doing this, saying Edit, IIS users, for example, allow full control, and then hit Apply and OK. And then you'll see in a couple of seconds that everybody will have proper permissions to that. Again, this would be only for the development environment. So once that's completed, you can see here now that we have the ability for IIS users to actually have modify, read, execute, access, and read access to that particular folder and its subfolders. So verifying the IIS installation. Start your favorite web browser and go to localhost. And this is what you should see at this point. This is the default web page for IIS. You can see here in my favorite web browser, Firefox, I type in localhost and I hit enter. And again, IIS responds at this point with the default web page. So if you get this far, you know IIS is basically ready to go as far as receiving the application side of the PowerServer 2021 deployment. So the next thing you may want to do is the web browser trust level. This allows your web browser to access your local IIS web server. You can do that only if, for example, because of security, the way your OS is set up, that you may need to actually unblock it or give it a higher trust is basically a better way of saying it. So go to the Windows Control Panel, select Internet Options, go to Windows 10 Search. There's another option, is just type in Internet. That's another way to get to it. Select Internet Options, select Open, and you should see a dialog that looks like this. So for example, here in Windows 10, I've selected the search. There's Internet Options. That brings up a dialog that looks just like I showed you there in the slide. You'll go to Security, Trusted Sites, and then if you go to Sites here, for example, this is where you want to make sure that you have localhost there. And I would also hit this checkbox saying that this trust is also there for HTTPS traffic as well as regular HTTP traffic. And then you're ready to go. So .NET and runtime installations. The Appeon Installer starts, and it starts the installer from the Appeon website. You would then select the components that you need, and again on the far right hand tab, additional options that if you want to be able to pick up the demo database. Notice that we're going to actually pick up the PowerBuilder runtime, which was the original release, which is PowerBuilder 2021 build 1288. And then it's going to go through and install the appropriate .NET frameworks. The .NET Framework 4.8 is used for non-PowerServer activity within the PowerBuilder IDE. There's a lot of .NET capabilities in the IDE, and you would use the .NET Framework for that. But however, for PowerServer, we're going to need the .NET Core SDK, and the .NET Core runtime is going to be selected as well. These should be automatically selected, and then they'll be pre-installed. Note that PowerServer needs the .NET Core. Select PowerBuilder runtimes as appropriate. And you'll notice here that if you're actually installing the latest PowerServer PowerBuilder 2001 maintenance release, is going to actually bring down build 1311, which is the most current as of this particular recording of this session. So we're going to the Appeon website, going here to Downloads. What I would first do is go to License Management. Have a look at the licenses, specifically yours. You can see in my case, the license that I have attached to me personally is Cloud Pro. So make sure that your license assigned to you is Cloud Pro. If you can't see this particular web page, then go to your license administrator within your organization and ask them to verify that the license assigned to you is the Cloud Pro edition. Then you'll return to Downloads. You're going to select the PowerBuilder Installer. It's actually going to bring that file down. You want to basically open up the folder where it got downloaded. And then you want to use the right-hand mouse button and run the installer as administrator. Make sure you accept the actual agreement and select Continue. And you notice here at this point, my machine already has everything installed. So you'll have the ability to do an online install if nothing is there. However, you'll also have the ability, there'll be two checkboxes here. Do the install across the internet or do the offline install. This is the one I would highly recommend. So if you actually do the download of the offline installer, it brings down the install packages. This is a lot nicer here because if you ever have to reinstall PowerBuilder or PowerServer 2021, you can do it from those packages. You don't have to download everything again. Or if you have multiple developers within your organization, you can put these packages on a file server, and then you can actually run the install from there. Notice, however, that the IDE is going to come down, PowerServer Toolkit, the PowerBuilder compiler is going to come down, Snap Develop is going to come down. Again, this is an optional one. I highly recommend it. And then if you want to experiment with actually converting all your PowerScript code to C#, you can also check the PowerScript migrator, and you can have a look at the .NET data store as well. Again, these are all optional, but I would highly recommend that you at least bring down Snap Development. And then notice at the bottom right-hand side, you would just hit the download button, bring down those install packages, and then run the setup.exe of those particular packages once you've downloaded, and it'll install everything on your development environment. So once you've run the Appeon installer and either done an online install or brought down the packages and run the packages to install the PowerBuilder runtime, we have to look at the PowerBuilder IDE itself. A requirement for PowerServer 2021 is to make sure that the PowerBuilder IDE is executed as admin privileges. So we'll go to the Windows Start, have a look at the PowerBuilder IDE, either in the Start and the shortcut or within your tile area. Use the right-hand mouse button and open the file location. You should now get a list of applications that have shortcuts. Find PowerBuilder IDE 2021, select the Compatibility tab, and then check Run as Administrator. It should look something like this. Note that the Run as Administrator is also required for the Power Client feature, as well as the new PowerServer 2021. So you should make sure that the IDE runs in this mode. In fact, I've been doing this since PowerBuilder 11.5, because sometimes even in Appeon PowerBuilder, when you're doing some .NET framework functionality, you need to have Run as Administrator as your setting. So you can see here, if I actually go to Properties of the Appeon PowerBuilder 2021, you enter into the Microsoft Windows shortcut area. You can see the shortcut here. Use the right-hand mouse button, go to Properties, have a look at the actual compatibility area, and then make sure that this checkbox, Run Program as Administrator, is checked. If it isn't, make sure you check it, and then hit Apply and OK. And you'll notice here the next time you start the IDE, the next thing it's going to show you is, I'm going to start the IDE, but I'm going to run it as administrator. You're going to say yes at this point. So following all those steps and some of the tips that I've given you, congratulations! You're now ready to actually install and build your first PowerServer 2021 Cloud Application project. Don't forget, you can find Appeon on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and of course, my first recommendation, the AppionCommunity.com website, where you can find all sorts of discussions, technical articles, training, videos, and a lot more. Stay tuned right after this presentation. If you're actually in the Elevate 2021 conference, there'll be time for a live question and answer. I hope you enjoy the rest of the Elevate 2021 conference. Thanks so much for watching.